Welcome back from the break. I am Yorgos Alagiannis. I am on the finance faculty here. I'm also the faculty advisor for the Darden Capital Management. And I'm going to be the moderator for the next three speakers, so until lunchtime. And I'm sure we have just an exciting continuation of the program as we had in the previous two speakers. It's my pleasure to introduce you our first speaker. Our first speaker is, for this part of the program, is Steve Roach. He's the non-executive chairman of Morgan Stanley Asia. And prior to that, which happened in 2007, he was Morgan Stanley's chief economist. He was heading up the firm's highly regarded global team of economists that are located around the world. During his 25-year career as an economist at Morgan Stanley, Mr. Roach was widely recognized as one of Wall Street's most influential thought leaders. His recent research focuses on globalization, the emergence of China and India, and the capital market implications of global imbalances. He's widely quoted in the financial press and other media. Has been a leading contributor on the op-ed pages of the world's leading newspapers, and he is the author of The Next Asia. And he's going to be talking to us about the next China, implications for Asia and the global economy. Please join me in welcoming Steve Roach. Thank you.
Is this working? I think you have a longer neck than I do. It projects. No, it seems to be working fine. Thanks very much, and it's a pleasure to be here and see some of my old friends and a lot of new faces. The topic is Asia. To talk about Asia, I think you need to have a view of the world, and so I will start with some of my baseline views of the world. It's interesting, I was staying down the hill overnight and got up and did some work this morning. And then, as I usually do, plugged on into CNBC to get my sort of fill of the commentary on the latest numbers. And then there was I go to a commercial break, and a stream of political ads come on that I just usually hit the mute button, but I was a little too slow on the mute button, and there was some local Congress, I think it was a candidate, I can't be absolutely certain, but trying to unseat the local incumbent, and says, don't vote for incumbent XYZ because he sends jobs to China. And if you send him back to Washington, you're going to ship your jobs over to China. And of course, that type of campaign is pretty much being played out over the weekend all across the country. And I do want to come to this because China is really in the crosshairs of our political process in the United States. On September the 29th, the U.S. House of Representatives, as most of you know, your elected officials, by a margin of, I think, 81% of the members that voted, huge bipartisan support to pass a bill that would allow U.S. companies to seek trade sanctions on everything China sells in the U.S. to compensate for what is perceived to be a manipulated, undervalued Chinese currency. These are important developments that will play a key role in shaping not just Asia and China and the United States, but could have a profound impact on the broad global economy. You guys have been talking the last couple of days about reset, recovery, all these other sort of cosmic constructs that would allow you to have a sort of a clean view or a view of the global economy that's heavily dependent on where we've been. I would say that these trade issues, the Asia issues, the interplay between the United States and China will ultimately be right at the top of the global agenda, not just going into the election, but post-election. I have a view that that is pretty much personified by this cover, that Asia is very important in shaping and reshaping the global economy. But don't extrapolate. Don't draw a straight line. We know what Asia's done. We know what China's done over the last 5 years. In the case of China, over the last 30 years. It has been spectacular. But there's a lot more to the story than just extrapolation. And for those of you as investors who want to try to understand the role that this region, this country, now the second largest economy in the world, is going to play in shaping markets and the global economy, you've got to do more than talk about 1.3 billion people, an economy that's grown 10% a year for 30 years. You've got to get under the hood and figure out what's really going on there. So I'm going to try to do that and take you through some pictures to address that. As I said, Asia as the region of the world that has been perhaps the greatest beneficiary of the explosion in global trade and trade liberalization, you've got to have a view of the global landscape first before you draw some specific conclusions on the region. This chart makes 2 points. It was terribly bad in '09 globally. 4 metrics on the left that tell you how bad it was for the global economy in 2009 compared to the norm of earlier global downturns in 1975, 82, and 91, the composite profile indicated by the red lines. Whether it's output per capita, industrial output, the unprecedented collapse in global trade, the third set of bars are the increase in global unemployment. We haven't seen anything like what we went through. You know that. You've heard that. And the forecaster says, well, when things are really bad, our theories say that there's usually a sharp snapback. Imagine I'm holding a big rubber band up here. The further down you pull the rubber band, when you let go of it, it typically snaps back. And there are 4 reasons on the right that argue that the snapback theory, the rubber band theory of the business cycle, is probably not going to work this time. And that's where I am in terms of the global scenario. Weak, anemic recovery in the world because the crisis is far from over. It was a much broader, more synchronous downturn in the world than we've ever seen. And the imbalances persist on the demand side, driven by the American consumer, on the supply side, driven by export-led Asian economies. Until we address these global imbalances and until we work our way through what is left in the financial crisis, the global recovery is going to be weak. Does that mean we'll have a double dip or a relapse? Nobody knows. I don't know. None of your other forecasters who have been in front of you today, with the exception of maybe Dick Mayo, knows the truth. But I think when you have a weak, anemic recovery, you're vulnerable to a relapse. You don't have a cushion. So if something bad comes along, and who knows if it's going to, something bad is going to come along, you don't have the built-in cushioning mechanism to withstand the blows of a shock. So you could certainly have a relapse. My baseline case is we don't have a relapse, but we have a weak recovery that leaves you vulnerable to that possibility. And in a weak recovery, you still have high unemployment in the weakest pieces of the global economy, namely the United States, Europe, and Japan. And there's a lot of political forces that spin out of that that put pressure on the rest of the world, especially this U.S.-China nexus that I'll come back to. Demand side of the world, unbalanced for a long time, still unbalanced today. Take a look, you can see it right in front of you. U.S., 4.5% of the world's population, a $10 trillion consumer. China and India on the right, collectively close to 10 times as many people, 37% of the world's population, but you add up their consumption, $2.25 trillion, 1/4 that of America. In a post-crisis period, I would argue that there's going to be a lot of lingering weakness on the large-scale economies on the left, especially U.S. and Europe. Even if you're an optimist on consumption trends in the developing world, and I'm definitely an optimist on consumption going forward in China and India, they don't have the scale to fill the void that's going to be left by a shortfall of U.S. and European consumers. So the conclusion from this chart is post-crisis, given the likelihood of ongoing corrections in the U.S. and Europe, the global consumption outlook is one for much slower growth going forward, and that's challenging for nations elsewhere in the world who are very dependent on external demand that is shaped by consumers in the developed world. The U.S. consumer, this is a presentation on Asia, but just my nickel on the U.S. consumer is that basically, if I had to come up with a construct for you to think about, I'd say the U.S. consumer is toast. On the left, you have the consumption share of the U.S. GDP.